My theory is that with a really good understanding of the incubation process, we can have better hatch rates. Now, of course, that changes depending on where our eggs are coming from. Of course, we all know that shipped eggs, we tend to have less than stellar hatch rates. I aim for about 40%. Anything better is a miracle. Anything less goes with the territory of shipping. With our own eggs, rule of thumb is that you want to incubate within like 10 days. After 10 days, eggs start to lose their viability. But of course, you want to incubate as quickly as possible. And actually, I've incubated my own eggs up to like 3 weeks later with success. I think it has to do with how they're stored. I start with my eggs pointy side down. I store them at room temperature in an egg carton, and then every day I'll rotate them completely, one time a day. I'm not sure if there's any science behind that. It just seems to work for me. And of course, every hatch is a learning process, and sometimes depending on climate and location, our incubation methods may vary. Today, I want to talk about temperature and humidity throughout the incubation process and the importance of each. And so you can store this information in your memory bank and use this as you're making decisions for incubation moving forward. Temperature has to do with the rate at which our chicks are developing. We want our chicks to develop and begin to hatch within 21 days. If our temperatures are too high, we'll see that chicks are hatching a couple days early. If temperatures are too low, we'll see that chicks are hatching a couple days late. And with those temperature fluctuations, sometimes we'll still get chicks to hatch, but sometimes we'll see abnormalities, defects, we'll see loss of life. Sometimes when we have temperature spikes or lulls in the incubation process, we'll see eggs just quit in the developing process. Defects like wry neck and splay leg and crossbeak can sometimes be attributed to problems with temp and humidity throughout the process. And our incubators aren't always accurate. I actually found out this year, after using the same incubators for 3 years, that I was beginning to have temperature and humidity and like big problems. And at that point, I bought some secondary hygrometers and thermometers. I actually bought the Goves, Govee, and put those in my incubators and had better success in my hatch rates. Really, what had happened is it's like my incubators lost the ability to hold temp and humidity when the temperature outside the room was fluctuating a lot. So like in those early summer weeks. Weird. I can't imagine what was so different this year than other years, but it was just a weird year for hatching all around for me. And humidity affects air sac health and ability to hatch. So we just talked about air sacs in that last video that I posted, and you'll find at the wide end of the egg is an air sac, and that air sac is there because one of the last stages of incubation, that chick is going to pip internally through the membrane in that egg into the air sac, and it's going to breathe for about 24 hours using that air sac before it pips externally and begins to unzip and hatch. Our eggs are porous, and so while those embryos are developing, oxygen can move through the egg into the embryo, and moisture can leave the egg through the porous eggshell. As moisture is leaving the egg, that air sac is growing. We want to see it get bigger throughout the incubation process. Humidity affects the rate at which moisture leaves the egg and the way that that air sac grows. So too high of humidity makes it so that moisture can't leave the air as quickly, the air sac stays smaller. Too low of humidity makes it so that moisture can leave faster, the air sac is bigger. It seems like any incubator book says that we want our humidity to be about 55% throughout incubation and like 75% at lockdown. Personally, I prefer to run mine around 35 to 45% throughout the incubation process and 55 to 65% at lockdown. I mean, really, if that throughout the incubation process. I'm in Florida. It's really humid here, like by nature. And so I will dry hatch throughout the incubation process. So I won't add water until lockdown, at which point I'll bump humidity up to about 60%. But that's one of those things that you will have to find what works in your area in terms of humidity and what you can keep stable in your incubators. I know some of you have been really alarmed when you find out like that you'll put a little bit of water in your incubator and the humidity spikes really quick. And a spike in humidity isn't as detrimental as a spike in temperature, and really low humidity seems to cause less problems than too high of humidity. Too high of humidity is when we see really sticky, wet chicks at the end of the incubation process, or when we see drowned chicks, chicks that are fully formed in the shell and can never quite hatch and have pipped internally, because it's like what happens is when they go to breathe, they're breathing in moisture and they drown before they can hatch. with too low of humidity and too big of air sacs, sometimes what we might see is chicks who are a little too small because they don't have as much room in the egg to develop and grow to be strong to hatch. Sometimes those chicks don't hatch because they don't have the girth and the strength to hatch. But again, that's usually less of a problem than too high of humidity and drowned sticky chicks. My personal opinion is that a lockdown is the most important phase of incubation, when the humidity matters the most, and having stable humidity that matters the most. So if we have like spikes in humidity throughout the incubation process, it's okay. We can just bring it back down the next day and add a little less water or dry hatch if that works for us in our area. At lockdown, it's important to keep humidity between 55 and 65%. Keep that incubator closed until all chicks have hatched and there's no more pipped. Because what happens is if chicks are pipped, so they're like pecking through the eggshell and there's holes in the eggshells, that membrane inside the egg that you can kind of see peel off when you crack open an egg, the humidity in the incubator is keeping that membrane moist so the chick can turn and move around and continue to unzip and hatch in that egg. And when we open the incubator while chicks are unzipped like that, definitely the humidity is going to fluctuate rapidly and it's going to drop, and oftentimes that can cause those membranes to dry out, and that's when we get what's called shrink wrap chicks. So that's why that's why we call it lockdown, because the incubator is locked down until no more chicks are pipped or unzipping, and they're fluffed out, and then we can take them out and open the incubator safely. And listen, sometimes even with all of the information and doing all of the right things, things just go awry, and we need to be prepared for that also, because as much as we can try to like perfect and mimic nature, you know how it goes. So good luck, happy hatching. Let me know how I can support you.